Hey, Joe, welcome to the Play Inspired podcast. Here, we're going to talk about your journey when it comes to examining your life in your own growth, in your own self growth. But today, we're going to add a little twist to it as well, given the current climate. We're going to talk about how the younger generation could, like be more, could participate more and be more. Help provide a much better future for the next generation. Anyway, Joe, give us a little bit of an intro and give us a little bit of a sneak peek inside your world.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll start with now. I guess I'm a podcaster and a musician, and I guess I used to be a comedian. I haven't done stand up since the pandemic started, but um, I'm based in Boston, and I am I've always been very kind of politically minded, and with my current podcast, Radicalize Me, I wanted to kind of
Mm,
interview people who are really involved in whether it's organizations or they organize and go to a lot of like rallies and protests and that kind of thing, or even people who are tuned into electoral politics in a way that I'm not. Just wanted to like put a bunch of these people, like conversations with these people out there, so that people, including myself, could get some ideas about like how do you jump in and
mm,
contribute.
mm. Yeah. So, what led to your exploration of this work? Like you mentioned that you've always been a little bit political minded. So, what were the events that led up to you exploring this a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I guess uh, when Bush got elected, when the second Bush got elected to the presidency, uh, I was probably, well, yeah, I was 11 years old during the 2000 election, so I was 12 when he took office. Um, and so that's like right when you're sort of old enough to at least be aware, of what's happening. I have vague memories of being a little kid, and I knew that like Bill Clinton won and he did something bad, like I didn't know all the details as a kid, but like, yeah. So, you hit 12 and that's when you're aware. And it's like, that's right when just insanity started in this country.
Mm,
Um, so, we have 9/11 in 2001. We have all the years of the Bush administration being a nightmare. Um, and all along the way there, I'm a teenager. This is from, uh, when I was 12 to when I was, I guess, 20 is when Obama took office. So those are like the formative years, and that's when I was observing all of this. And uh, you have like the big Jon Stewart Daily Show phenomenon going on at the time. You've got like Green Day with American Idiot. There's
mm,
bands like NoFX started talking about politics, in their music and in life too. Um, and I got really into that stuff. I was into like older, like Vietnam era protest music and that kind of thing. Um, and as uh, a fan of comedy too, and someone who, I was younger, I wanted to do comedy. Um, what I got really into was like the comedians who were very politically minded or like socially minded, like George Carlin.
mm,
uh, Lewis Black was really big at the time. I liked Chris Rock a lot. So there was like all this stuff happening culturally and like artistically too, that sort of fed into um get almost like gave me permission to say like this is not right. uh, there's something really really not good about all this. And so again, I was young and I didn't have a great sense of like, I knew my parents liked Clinton better than the Bushes and Reagan and whatever, but I didn't really know the difference. I didn't know, um, what had happened before in great detail. But I'm seeing all of this going on around me. the Bush administration's trying to like ban gay marriage with a constitutional amendment. They're like, you know, doing all these wars for no reason, like to just like trying to, you know, steal oil and stuff from other countries. And um, it it was just a nightmare. And I again was, you know, given permission to kind of um, be opposed to it. And then in 2008 or, you know, 2007, like around there, you get Obama pops up, and then it's like, oh, this is really exciting for young people. We feel like this is really going to be something different. And as many people know, it wasn't that different. You know, it was visually very different. He's obviously like a smarter guy. He's like a, a great speaker. He's, I'm sure, a better person like in person. Like if you just randomly met Obama, Bush, and Trump, like, and you didn't know who they were, uh, I would think Obama would probably come out on top. But yeah, it was a big disappointment for me, and I sort of felt really betrayed and a little lost for a while until the Bernie Sanders movement happened in 2016. And since then, I've just been very tuned into it. I around that time, I started doing a live political comedy show in Philly when I lived there. And that just became like, you know, what I was about. And more recently, so during the pandemic, I started writing more political music as well. So like I have that stuff going, and I started this podcast to like you know, get the conversation going with activist type stuff. And yeah, it's just been now like every passing year for the for the past like decade, I've been feeling, I feel like I get more and more uh radical, like radically minded. I'm just like, this is just terrible. um it's just such a mess, and like there needs to be a massive shift, because as it is, there's a massive shift in the absolute wrong direction. We're just headed for complete disaster. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's what got me here, is just witnessing this train wreck for 20 years.
I mean, you know, like looking back now, knowing, you know, like what's currently happening, it seems that whatever Clinton did back in the day wasn't even that bad. The tan suit, I don't know what the problem was with the tan suit in the first place, like Obama's tan suit. But compared to what's happening right now, doesn't seem so bad. Not at all.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
right now it's like, um, and you know, I say all this sitting where I am, where like I, I'm lucky enough that like my life has always been relatively stable. Um, so whoever's in office, it's not like, you know, my
Mm.
life is is destroyed by it. Because like, yeah, I, from my vantage point, it's like, yeah, the Trump phenomenon has just been there's this like chaos element to it that's really damaging. Um, and that's what I think even a lot of people on the left, or I don't know, people who say they're on the left at least, um, I've been seeing a lot of this where they're downplaying this thing that happened last week with the Capitol. And um, and you know, I'm seeing like, oh, you know, like this is barely even a democracy at all. And it's like, yeah, guys, no, we all know the criticism. Like you're right. Like the what we're told about this country is not true. And there's like, you know, a massive shift that needs to happen. But also like you need the system to like be at a level point in order for you to like do the work to change it and everything. I think a lot of people are under sort of a delusion that they're going to thrive in a breakdown of society, and it's just not true for most of us.
No. There's a lot of things that, people do and say, and they take action based upon that because they're looking at these short-term thing. If I do this, then I'm going to get this now, but they're not seeing the long-term effects of what they just did. And I don't want to single them out, but the Trump supporters, they seem to be acting this way. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh well, yeah. I sort of wonder what their goal was, because like uh all at once again, like it's very chaotic, but the more information that's coming out now, it seems like it was very uh methodically planned and
Mm,
everything. So
yeah.
uh I don't know. I think they might be playing a long game, which is really dangerous, because the way they want to go long term is pretty bad.
Yeah. So you mentioned in your website there that elections alone do not change anything. And right now, well, not just right now, but it seems that it's the main thing that we are all hyper focused on is, okay, so this person who's sitting right now, let's replace him with someone else because whatever he did is not good enough. So what's something that we are not seeing beyond elections?
Yeah, well, I think uh I would so yeah, I always try to emphasize like there is value in elections. It's just not the whole picture. So like um again, it's like all the stuff people are saying who are downplaying the Trump insurrection. They say like, oh, but like Democrats don't even do this, and like the system's bad, and it's like, yeah, it really is, but also like there's a big difference between having Democrats in office and having Republicans in office. It's not enough of a difference, but it's there. But yeah, I mean, so the reason I frame it that way, I think, is because that's where I was coming from, and I think it's where a lot of people are coming from. I think so much of the frustration in politics, and some of this might even apply to these Trump people, that people are just hyper focused, like you said, on the presidential election, especially, but national politics in general, um, where they get all wrapped up in like again, I'm just as guilty of this, but they get all wrapped up in these people who are running for office, and uh, then they get so angry at anyone who questions who they like running for office, and they get so upset when the person that they've put on a pedestal is disappointing, because like the fact is, like, even the people who really want to change things, like, I think AOC and Ilhan Omar, these people, I think they're genuine. I think they really want things to be different, and if they could speak freely without consequence, I think they they're probably pretty radical, like like more than they let on. Um, but yeah, so it's that fixation, and I was coming from it like with the Bernie campaign not quite making it again last year. I was like, all right, I can't do this anymore. Can't do like the emotional roller coaster. Not that it's all an emotional roller coaster, but this specific like, oh, this guy seems great, and if we get him, that's the way we're gonna fix it. It's like, no, it probably would have been good if he won, but like, um, there are all these other avenues, and um, so what they are, which I've been dancing around for a couple minutes, is like, uh, number one, the most visual thing is, or the most visible thing is protesting, right? Like protesting in the street, do, doing what these Trump people did last week, which is bad. It's not, that's beyond protesting, but yeah, being in the street, um, te- you know, telling the police like, no, you can't get away with this anymore. Uh, like that is very important to be able to have normal people who might not be that invested in all the stories of politics to look at the news and be like, oh wow, you know 20,000 people came out because the police apparently have been like killing a lot of people, most of them black, um, without much consequence. So I think that as a statement, at least, is really important. And then there's just, so many organizations that do really great work. And I think this is where it gets less visible. Right. So you have Black Lives Matter is like sort of a pseudo organization. They're not like really, uh, a thing with a headquarters and like, it's sort of a loose affiliation, but like,
Yeah.
but then you get into like Sunrise Movement and that kind of thing. What's the other one? There's like Greenpeace is another environmental one. Um, even like what's the National Abortion Rights Action League. Like there's all sorts of these things that do a ton of behind the scenes work in influencing politicians, especially like state and local politicians, where the fact of the matter in the US system, at least, a lot of change starts at the state level. Which is kind of a problem, but like we have to like work with that because this is where we live. And again, it's just they're doing so much that people don't see. And there's a lot of ways to be involved with that. You can just give money, and they'll send you a tote bag, and that's cool, and they'll have some money. And you can also volunteer. Not everyone can do that, but if you have time, if you are fortunate financially, you can go and volunteer. But then there's also like there are careerists. Like I've interviewed people on my show who like work full-time jobs for these organizations, which is something I've tried to do, but never been accepted. But if you were a better student than I was and you're qualified, you can get a job doing this, and then you don't have to worry about like, oh man, like I got to go to work all week, and that I've got all the regular everyday things to do for myself, cook for myself, and whatever. How am I going to like find time to volunteer to this thing or whatever? And so a great position to be in is no, my job is to like contribute to this. Then you're getting paid, you're set up, and you're helping. And I think what else? I think people underestimate the importance of calling their representatives and senators. And apparently, if you're not one of their constituents, they don't really care. Like, so if I call like Nancy Pelosi's office, like she probably won't care because I don't live in San Francisco. So they might take your call and be like, okay, yeah, we'll get back to you. But if you call your own, like it's actually their job to to like listen to us, especially House reps, and and Canada has like a bicameral legislature, is that right?
Yeah, we call, yeah, it's called different, but it's pretty much the same.
Yeah. Yeah, which is another thing. I think we should abolish the Senate, but
Oh yeah.
I think, yeah, like, it depends on the senator, but like representatives, like they're supposed to do that. And most of them, if you call, like there's someone there to take the calls and be like, here's what's important to people, because they want to get reelected. If all these people who are their voters call and say you should do this, like they kind of have to listen if they want to stay in office. As much as like big money influence is a problem, and all of that, like they are kind of beholden to us, but only if we act on it.
Yeah.
So Yeah, it's just it's a whole system at play. There's like, a few different prongs here, and if people can get out of their head a little bit, and like, again, like, I'm talking from my experience because like this is what I went through. If you're able to take a step back and be like, oh, there's like 5 different ways to do this, and I can pick one, and then that's one more person helping in that area, and then there's um we need people doing all of it, and then it all fits together.
Yeah. Okay. So now I have a question. From a Canadian's point of view, okay, Americans seem to demonize socialism. All right. and and from a Canadian's point of view, I'm like, but why? I mean, it's pretty fun, like universal health care, tax benefits, assured income for the handicap, and all sorts of other things. Paid time off, whether you're a new mom or a new dad, you get paid time off. It doesn't matter if you gave birth or not, but mom or dad doesn't matter. So why are Americans demonizing socialism?
Yeah, that's a good question. um it, so I think I guess I'll start like way back, and I think, and I'm not like a historian, but I think
Mm,
America just has this thing running through it of like individualism,
mm,
um as like a very, and that's sort of a capitalist mindset. So I would imagine that's at play at least a bit in Canada and in the UK, and like all these
mm,
places. But I think it's like sort of a uniquely American thing to be so uh uh committed to that.
mhm.
Um so from the beginning, it's like, no, fuck you, like we're gonna do our thing, like leave us alone. Um and just, I don't know, all of our stories are like George Washington won the revolution, and it's like, yeah, a lot of people working with him, like Lewis and Clark like paved the fucking, and it's like, okay, like I think they had like indigenous people helping them along, it's all of our sort of like stories and myths like tend to leave out um the uh again, it's like the activism thing, like all the moving parts and the multiple people involved in making things work.
Mm,
um so I think you have that from the beginning, and then uh when it comes to uh World War II, and I guess like kind of post World War II, where we were like fighting all the bad communists in the world, like um and I don't know, uh I, I again, I'm not a historian, but I think like I don't know how much of like the USSR was actually a threat to us. I know that like North Korea is kind of a crazy country. So like I think in some ways it was like, yeah, some of these countries are like a real problem to be contended with, even if we, weren't great about how we went about it. Um it's like, yeah, like from that point, people just associated uh our sort of national enemy and sort of this creeping menace. I think that's even the term they use. Like, um, they associated that with communism and with socialism, and of course, no one knows the difference between all these terms
mm,
in the U.S. Um, and yeah, I think again, I don't know the extent to which this is done in other countries, but like our uh history and like civics education is very nationalistic. Um and it's one of those things that like uh that the US can't admit about itself, that we look down upon in other cultures and in history. And but I think like history books will look at the US and say like, yeah, they were very nationalistic and very imperialistic, and um so yeah, it was very much framed as the U.S. is the place where uh, we do democracy. That was our idea. Like we we were the you know Greece sort of like did a little bit of it, but then everyone was like, forget that, until George Washington said, like, how about democracy? And then we like saved the world. And yeah, it took us another 100 years to free the slaves. And then even after that, it was a disaster. And it's like, um, yeah, like honestly, I think a lot of people you could ask on the street in America, um, when when did like, was the U.S. the first to free their slaves? And it's like they would, a lot of them probably say yes. A lot of them would
Yeah.
actually think that like we paved the way for like not having slaves. Um, so I sort of forget which question I was answering. Oh yeah,
That's okay.
socialism, right? Um, yeah, and then uh, the sort of like Gilded Age, I think, created this like super wealthy class that really is just ruthless about fighting for its interests. Um, and they will, spread any lie, and they basically like have just poisoned the brains of generations of Americans to
Yeah.
you know to think that anything like resembling socialism is bad. Like somehow people take this logical leap from like, oh, you want universal health care, so we're going to end up with a Stalin like leader. Like that's what's going to happen because you want universal health care. And it's like, I don't think that's necessary. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm still in the process of, I have embraced socialism much more myself in the past couple of years.
Mm.
I'm still in the process of kind of learning all these things, and I'm just starting to learn that like, oh yeah, no, there's been plenty of like socialist countries that were not autocratic nightmares, um, and we've just literally just been lied to.
So we're going to touch up on the big question here. Okay. We're going to touch up on systemic racism now. So this is one of the things that it's like a tough conversation to have, even with just yourself. Like earlier this year, I've had this conversation with myself, even though I'm an immigrant, Asian, queer, and all that stuff. There are still certain things I was still able to somehow benefit from systemic racism. If I just act compliant, I can be the token friend where you're treated as white, but not exactly white. But anyway, so what are the first steps that we could take towards addressing systemic racism?
Well, as a white man from Connecticut, I am happy to take this question. Um, yeah, no, I can definitely speak from the perspective of um
Yeah.
y- not being fully aware of this for much of my life, and then starting to come around to it. Um because yeah, growing up, I was definitely taught that like racism is wrong and you should treat everyone equally, and Martin Luther King was a great person, and like all this. Yeah. uh
Mhm.
but it's very overview. It's There's not a lot of uh uh acknowledgement of everything beneath the surface there.
Okay.
um so yeah, it's honestly like this past year has been so transformative, it's hard to even think back to like
Mhm.
what I thought before. Cause like, yeah, I think even I went through like a crazy shift when um we had the Black Lives Matter movement become this national phenomenon, and we were all shocked by what we saw, that with George Floyd. And
Mm.
um I had to sort of contend with that myself, that like, yeah, I have never, like, I don't know, I've never loved cops. I was never like super fan of them, but like, yeah, it didn't occur to me that like, no, cops are like, especially here, they protect white supremacy. They protect private property and money, and they're based on, like, a racist history. That hadn't really occurred to me. And I think back, just a couple of years ago, when I lived in Philly, I was like, yeah, I would call the police because like a car alarm was going off. Like, I had one of the places I lived in Philly, there was just like a car alarm that would go off every night, which is really annoying, but like, uh, not a police issue, and there I was, like, living in a majority Black neighborhood and being like, "Hey, police, like, come deal with this." And I just really didn't understand the gravity of uh, what Black people have actually dealt with.
Mm.
There's a great clip of Angela Davis on YouTube. It's like one of the first things that come up if you just search her name on YouTube. Where she had, because she was arrested for something, I don't know. She was just getting out of jail for like whatever thing, and someone was interviewing her and said like, oh, but like, what about the violence or whatever from the Black Panthers? And she was like, the like when you ask me about what about the violence of the Black Panthers, it just tells me that you have no idea what Black people have dealt with in this country. It's like really absurd to for 400 years do have a slave system, and then uh uh what's it called, segregation, um redlining, all of this stuff. And then as like the second people like hit back, like, hey, whoa, what about the violence? Like, it's insane. And again, like, even knowing sort of the history, I knew about slavery, I knew about segregation, but knowing all of that, it wasn't the line, the dots weren't connected for me. And I think that it's yeah, we just live in different worlds, even if we are next to each other. Because my parents are, they're like liberal, like, Democrat, um very uh, uh forward thinking in a lot of ways, but it sort of struck me as odd last year when I started realizing all of this, and I thought, you know what, my parents grew up in New York City in the 60s and 70s. Like, how were they not aware of this? Like, they knew a lot more like Black kids than I did growing up. Um, how did this like get by them? And the fact is, like, you have to look for it if you're white, because it really does hide in plain sight. Um, so I guess when it comes to starting to confront it as I'll say, like, a non-Black person,
Yeah.
especially when we're
Yeah.
talking about this stuff, but generally as a white person, um, yeah, I guess like listening is just really important. Like, let some of these more like shocking things that people say like wash over you a bit, and give it a minute to sit and think about why they might be saying it. I had heard the term abolish police, and I didn't really understand it
Mm.
before. I remember hearing, again, I loved these like politically minded comics, and I remember hearing Richard Pryor at one point talking about, the American fascist state or whatever. Like he was talking about this thing, and it was like really he very casually just like said this um hyper like accusatory thing about the United States. And I wasn't like angry, but I remember being like, wait, what? Like um and it takes a while to sink in, and then it's like, well, yeah, of course, like why wouldn't he feel that way? um yeah, this is a guy probably grew up in like the mid 20th century as a black person in America. um so yeah, I think uh uh just listening a bit is really important. It's really easy to just when you hear certain things, be like, well, but I didn't, and my parents are not, like, like, it's like, just take a breath, take it easy, you're fine.
Yeah.
Listen to it, hear it out, study it.
Yeah.
you know um just like anything else, be skeptical, but not like um
Yeah.
have a wall up.
Yeah, it's always nice to ask this question simply because I always like hearing a perspective of non-black people of color and white people. Because personally, the reason why I started exploring this part, because I was under the impression, I was under this, well, I can't even layer of, I'm a person of color, I'm an immigrant. I am not at all benefiting from systemic racism. But then hearing another non-black person of color talk about how she has benefited from this, and I'm like, well, shit, yeah, okay. And that's why I always, and then that's, and so that's why I always love hearing perspective from non-black people of color and white people, because really we could all help, we can all be allies when it comes to this, because we are all affected by this, whether you benefit from it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, how would you say that you have benefited?
All right.
Uh,
So if I get pulled over, I know damn well that if I just act all compliant and say, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, constable. Oh, yeah, it's me. My bad." I could either get away with no ticket or a reduced fine. I already know that. I'm like, all right, I got pulled over. Let me get into character. So
yeah.
that's one thing. And then same thing at work. If I just comply, if I just they make Asian jokes, so funny. As soon as I laugh, I'm one of them. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's those small things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I just wonder, like, why. Uh, I wonder if it is just like a skin tone, not just, but like, I wonder if like skin tone itself does have a lot to do with it, because um it sounds similar to the story that I think a lot of previously considered non-white people, uh how they like sort of assimilated. Because I think uh and like, there's so many like dumb Italian Americans who love to be like, yeah, but we're people of color too. Like, guys, no, you're not. But like, there was a period of time where like Italians were looked at as an other, and were not considered among white people. But it's the same sort of thing that I think they learned how to act in certain ways and laugh at the Italian jokes and and all of that stuff. Um, and it's like, yeah, in the U.S., I'd say slavery had a lot to do with it, but like, yeah, it's like, why is skin color like making that much of a difference? Where like uh, uh, black people aren't able to be accepted in that way. It's just, yeah, it's insane. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so one final question here. What's a question you wish more people asked when it comes to getting involved?
um yeah, oh, that's a good question. Question, I wish people asked more. I guess, yeah, you know what I think it is uh, how can like my skills help in this situation, you know? Um, so it's not just how can I help, but it's how can I help, like in particular, um, like offer up, like I can do this. How does that help? You know, because like yeah, you know, I did comedy and I had done podcasts before, so I thought that's how I can help. You know, like that's one of the best ways I know how. Um, is to just do what I already know how to do in service of this thing. Um, so yeah, that's yeah, that's what I would say is what how can what I already know how to do help in this situation.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, Joe, I'd like to acknowledge you for the stand that you are, for having these tough conversations, for getting involved in making the world a better place, as cliche as that sounds. So, yeah, thank you for what you do.
Oh, yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
And so, what is the best way our listeners could get in touch with you?
The best way is probably um, Twitter, I guess. Yeah, let's do Twitter.
Mhm.
I am at Joe_Messina on Twitter. Um, and the show is Radicalize Me, and you can actually email the show at radicalizeme@gmail.com. I haven't gotten a lot of listener emails yet, so like if people want to write in and you know say you know correct me on something, say like hey you should talk about this, like whatever it is, I would love to have the input of other people because I'm not doing the show as an expert, I'm doing it as a learner. So if everyone
Mhm.
else wants to jump in, that would be awesome.
Yeah. And then they can find your podcast and everything else on your website as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the podcast has a website. It's Radicalize Me Pod at radicalizemepod.com.
No.
And then you know, if you want to just listen on your phone, it's on Apple Podcasts and
Mm.
Spotify and all that stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for coming in here and sharing what you've learned so far. We appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.